Saga from Armenia. The Princess Peri and the Rich Merchant. Chapter 2. The Princess Wedding. A few days after the princess's secret was revealed, the merchant began the construction of a magnificent bathhouse. The work took place for 2 years and the result was one of the most splendid buildings in that city. In that bathhouse, the merchant asked to decorate some rooms designed especially for the real family. In one of them, the merchant ordered install beautiful vases with magnificent and fragrant flowers, so that, at the right moment, the perfume, going through certain open holes in the wall, spread through the inside the next room, where the garment was. For the decoration of the environment in that flower room, he hired a skilled painter and asked him to represent in 2 frames, the princess's dream. So, on one wall, he painted, in a magnificent picture, the herd of deer coming from the woods to the river. And by representing the scene in which the male had his hooves stuck in the rotted tree trunk, he did it in a really creative way. In the same image, one could see clearly, on the one hand, how the male struggled to get rid of that imprisonment, on the other hand, how grateful he was. Seeing that the females, coming back from the river hastily, brought their mouths full of water to, in a common effort, satiate his thirst. Under this image, it was written, "My dream on the night of May 15. On the opposite wall, he painted, in an equally stunning picture, a scene of causing compassion. In this scene, one could see, on the one hand, another bunch of deer, returning from the river to the woods. On the other hand, a female who, having had their hooves implanted in that same rotted trunk of trees, could not go to the river to satiate its thirst. But suddenly, she was extremely cheerful, seeing that 2 of the males, having realized the situation in which she was, came with their mouths full of water to help her. But, unfortunately, in the instant in which they tried to provide the help, themselves had trapped there, and now it was seen that the water was trickling from their mouths, without being able to be taken advantage of. And at that very moment, a huge tiger, coming out of the woods, already prepared to jump against the imprisoned. Under this representation, was written, "My second dream that same night." The bathhouse built by the merchant became quickly object of universal attraction, and from all corners of the world, began to arrive visitors to contemplate, at least once in their lives, that wonder of architectural creation. And the princess herself, when she heard about the event, also wanted to go to the place, to meet the wonderful bathhouse. Then the trader, to surprise her at the moment in which she was going to change clothes for the bath, he instructed his employees in order to leave closed the opening that connected the flowered hall to the garment. And the princess, arriving at the bathhouse room, was greatly admired by the pomp there reigning. When she got out of the bath and entered the garment to change clothes again, the merchant opening the passage that connected the dressing room to the florid room, and let a wave of perfume enter the room, and she saw in it a clear intention to please, and became very pleased. After getting dressed, she called the merchant and asked him to open the door which gave entrance to the next hall, so she could see the flowers where that perfume came from. He then simulated annoyance, but it was just enough to increase even more her desire to see what was inside. With her insistence, he ended up opening the door. And when the 2 frames and what were represented in them appeared before the princess's curious eyes, she was like that petrified, and said to the trader, "But it's true that you had such a dream?" "Yes, I really had," answered the trader. "But then," she thought, "didn't I memorize my dream correctly?" For, if while the doe struggled to free itself from that imprisonment, the deer didn't really have desired to help her bringing water to satiate its thirst, why then that same night the fate wanted the trader dreamed of how I dreamed. There seems to have been some confusion, and it's possible I made a mistake. Well, I have already made a decision. I'm getting married, and this trader will be my husband. God himself has decided to make us spouses. and she hastened then to go to the castle tell his father he wanted to marry, but only if he allowed herself choose a groom according to what his own heart asked for. It was then with great joy that the king gave her his consent, and the choice made by her was fully approved, both for him and the queen. The news that the princess had decided to marry, and chosen the young merchant for husband, spread rapidly throughout the kingdom. The wedding was then held with parties that lasted 7 days and 7 nights. A year later, the princess gave birth to a beautiful boy, and the king's happiness knew no limit. Now the king would finally have an heir to the throne, and that made him very happy. After a year, the merchants' rents began gradually to decrease, and their expenses gradually to increasing. He then had no other way out than leave that capital and go try your luck in another country.